Asking for help. Introduction. Along your programming journey, you will inevitably need to ask questions in an online coding community like ours or in conversations with your colleagues. While asking questions may seem rather simple, in a programming environment, it is essential to ask well-formed questions with as much context as needed so you can get the most out of asking for help. In essence, help others help you. This lesson will provide you with the tools to effectively ask questions in communities such as our Discord chat, Stack Overflow, and in the workspace. Lesson overview. This section contains a general overview of topics that you will learn in this lesson. Explain techniques for asking programming questions. Explain and avoid qualities of bad questions. Ask effective and well-formed questions. Tips for getting the best help possible. Always provide your code and the surrounding context. You can ask theoretical, vague questions, but you're going to get theoretical, vague answers that probably won't be helpful to you and cause frustration on both ends as you and the person helping you dance around the real issue. The only time code doesn't need to be provided is if you're asking a purely conceptual question outside of a specific project or code snippet. Additionally, provide as much context as is necessary and zero in on the specific problem, such as pointing people to a specific function or line number in your code so people can give you the most relevant answers and quickly assist you. Ask about the problem at hand, not the solution itself. A lot of learners ask exactly how to approach a given task or assignment in this curriculum, such as the below. How do I complete step 5 of the rock, paper, scissors assignment? Keep in mind that you're actually supposed to figure out how to solve the assignment yourself, and figuring out an approach is essential to your learning journey. A much better question might look like this. Hey, I'm trying to return a string that displays the winner in rock, paper, scissors, but I'm getting a syntax error on line 12. How can I fix this? Here's my code. In sharing your attempt, people know that you've tried and won't suggest things that might not have worked out for you. It also allows them to debug your current iteration of code rather than sending you down a path that has you start all over again when you might be very close to a solution. Now, if you're completely stuck with where to start, it's completely fine to let people know that you're stuck. Asking where you can start and what you can research to get on the right track empowers you to be able to resolve issues largely on your own in the future, and might even empower you to help others with the same issue later on. It is also recommended that you share your pseudocode so people can nudge you in the right direction or correct any misunderstandings you may have. Don't take asking for more context to heart. People who volunteer in coding communities are here to help, but a question you may feel is coherent and obvious probably isn't if you are being asked for more context. While someone may seem obvious to a beginner, it's sometimes nowhere near obvious to an expert. An expert knows about many, many more situations that could cause an issue someone is experiencing and would want to refrain from sending a learner down the wrong path. People take time out of their day to help, so make it as easy as possible for them to help you. There's probably a good reason why they need more information, so trust their judgment and experience when they ask. Many people who are in coding chats are unpaid volunteers and are in no way obligated to answer your query, but because they truly do want to help you, they will ask for more information when needed. Assignment. Read and bookmark this amazing article by Gordon Zhu. It is great for reference to refer to whenever you find yourself needing to ask for help, and you might find yourself solving your own problem as you think about the points listed in the article. The video linked in this article is no longer available, but that is not an issue since we can explain debugging in detail later in the curriculum. Read about the XY problem, which is a common pitfall both new and experienced programmers fall into when asking questions. Check out this article from the world's most popular programming help resource, Stack Overflow. While asking for help is encouraged, it's important to avoid becoming a help vampire and be respectful of the communities or persons you are asking for help. This resource goes in depth to identify what a help vampire is, gives those who help others the tools to empower folks to ask questions effectively, and help the help vampire effectively. Okay, so let's check out this, the XY problem. Okay, so how to be great at asking coding questions. Print this out and read it now, then post it on your wall. Each time you have a question, read this again until it becomes second nature. The situation. Most people are absolutely terrible at asking questions, but the good thing is that you can follow a few simple steps to be great at it. Whether you're part of a team on Stack Overflow or a student at Watch and Code, asking good questions is essential. People that ask good questions are more effective because they get better answers more quickly and more often. There's also taken more seriously and get more respect, which matters if you care about your career. Good questions save time. Bad questions waste time. Bad questions create unnecessary back and forth conversations, which create frustration and conflict. People that ask bad questions get frustrated because they can't get help. And people that are trying to help get frustrated because answering bad questions is so damn frustrating. Bad question askers usually don't get far in their careers. That's because working with them is pure frustration. If you were a manager and had to fire someone, you'd immediately think of people that ask bad questions. The only thing that saves most bad question askers is that everyone around them is bad too. And so in relative terms, they look alright. The process. Understand the code to the best of your ability. Yes, really actually do this. Do not rush this step. Go through line by line, figure out what each line does, take notes, think about things that might be confusing, let them sink in. Google unfamiliar concepts. You want to avoid asking a question that you can figure out on your own with a quick Google search. Use a debugger to help you. If you don't know how to use a debugger or don't know what it is, watch the video below. Clearly describe the problem. Explain the context. For example, if you're a student at Watching Code, provide the URL for the associated lesson and explain that you're trying to do. If you have a question about a video, provide the timestamp too so that someone trying to help can reference the exact place where you got stuck. Explain the exact steps you took to produce the problem. For example, did you click 3 buttons in a specific order? Did it work fine in Chrome but not in Safari? Explain every little step. Explain what you expect to see. Explain what you actually see. For example, if there's an error message, share the entire error and the line of code that caused it. If it's a weird user interface problem, take a screenshot. Provide the code that illustrates the problem. If you're working on a large project, isolate just the part that is broken and share that. When you share code, make sure that the code doesn't change by the time someone looks at it. That means you should create a separate copy of your code just for your question. If you change the code by the time someone looks at it, your question is not just a bad question, it is inaccurate, which is worse than bad. That's because everything might have changed, but there's no way the person answering will know about it. Do not punish people that want to help you. Make sure the code you're sharing can reproduce the problem. Take the code you shared and make sure it behaves exactly like you described. If you share broken code that doesn't replicate the problem, it will be impossible to help you. Format your code consistently. It doesn't matter what style you use, just make sure that you're consistent. This makes your code easier to read. It will also help you with the next step. Check yourself for typos. Nobody wants to look for your typos. If you can't find your own typos, you need to learn how. Just keep reading. For example, if you're stuck on a lesson in a tutorial, go back to a point where your code worked and redo the lessons from there, making sure that your code continues to work each step of the way. If you get to a point where your code doesn't work, redo the lesson and double check for typos. If you're on a specific lesson and the code is provided, check the provided code and see if it works. If the provided code works but yours doesn't, then you have a typo. Now that you are sure that you have a typo, it's your job to find it. Go back methodically and figure out where you messed up. Do not waste someone else's time and ask them to do something that you should do yourself. Explain what you did to troubleshoot the problem. Come up with a list of hypotheses about what the problem might be and then test them methodically. For each hypothesis, explain what you did to test each hypothesis. During this process, you might figure out the problem yourself. This is very common. Explain what you think the problem might be. Based on your tests in the previous step, provide your best guess on what you think the problem might be. Proofread your question. Read through your question and make sure you've provided everything that someone would need to answer it. Edit for clarity. If you think something might be confusing, fix it. If there's a typo, fix it. If you have typos in your question, people will assume that you have typos in your code. And like I said before, other people are not your personal typo hunters. Send updates and remember this will not be your last question. If you figured out the answer before anyone can respond, then tell people so they don't waste time looking for an answer you've already found. When you get an answer back, take time to digest it carefully and fully understand what the person is saying. Keep in mind they might not actually be right, so you need to verify that their solution works. Thank each person that helped you and remember that they didn't have to answer your question, but for some reason they wanted to. The XY problem. What is it? The XY problem is asking about your attempted solution rather than your actual problem. This leads to enormous amounts of wasted time and energy, both on the part of people asking for help and on the part of those providing help. User wants to do X. User doesn't know how to do X, but thinks they can fumble their way to a solution if they can just manage to do Y. User doesn't know how to do Y either. User asks for help with Y. Others try to help user with Y, but are confused because Y seems like a strange problem to want to solve. After much interaction and wasted time, it finally becomes clear that the user really wants help with X and that Y wasn't even a suitable solution for X. The problem occurs when people get stuck on what they believe is the solution and are unable to step back and explain the issue in full. What to do about it? Always include information about a broader picture along with any attempted solution. If someone asks for more information, do provide details. If there are other solutions you've already ruled out, share why you've ruled them out. This gives more information about your requirements. Remember that if your diagnostic theories were accurate, you wouldn't be asking for help, right? Example 1. Noob doesn't actually want the last 3 characters in a file name, he wants the file extension, so why ask for the last 3 characters? Example 2. How can I echo the last 3 characters in a file name if they're in a variable echo? Why 3 characters? What do you really want? Do you want the extension? Yes. There's no guarantee that every file name will have a 3-letter extension, so blindly grabbing 3 characters does not solve the problem. Example 2. If Angela had just started by explaining she wants to prevent others from detecting her OS, this could have been a much shorter, more productive discussion. Angela, return some lines starting with OS, how to change it. Look in the source code for Nmap, find how it figures out the Linux part, then rewrite your TCP/IP stack to not operate in a way Nmap can detect. Yeah, but I don't know about Linux System API at all. Well, Nmap's fingerprint is based on the way the TCP/IP stack works. There's no real way except to rewrite the appropriate parts of said stack. I really need to avoid these messages. Can IP tables do this work? Well, don't use OS detection or version scanning. I want to prevent others from knowing the type of my OS. So she probably should have just started with that. That's what it sounded like. How do I ask a good question? Search and research and keep track of what you find, even if you don't find a useful answer elsewhere on the site, including links to related questions that haven't helped, can help others in understanding how your question is different from the rest. Write a title that summarizes a specific problem. The title is the first thing potential answerers will see, and if your title isn't interesting, they won't read the rest, so make it count. Pretend you're talking to a busy colleague and have to sum up your entire question in one sentence. What details can you include that will help someone identify and solve your problem? Include any error messages, key APIs, or unusual circumstances that make your question different from similar questions already on the site. Spelling, grammar, and punctuation are important. Remember, this is the first part of your question others will see. You want to make a good impression. If you're not comfortable writing in English, ask a friend to proofread it for you. If you're having trouble summarizing the problem, write the title last, and sometimes writing the rest of the question can make it easier to describe the problem. Examples: bad. C number math confusion. Why does using float instead of int give me different results when all my inputs are integers? Bad. Session doubt. How can I redirect users to different pages based on session data in PHP? Android if-else problems. Why does str value evaluate to false when str is set to value? Introduce the problem before you post any code. In the body of your question, start by expanding on the summary you put in the title. Explain how you encountered the problem you're trying to solve and any difficulties that have prevented you from solving it yourself. The first paragraph in your question is the second thing most readers will see, so make it as engaging and informative as possible. Help others reproduce the problem. Not all questions benefit from including code, but if your problem is with code you've written, you should include some. But don't just copy in your entire program. Not only is it likely to get you in trouble if you're posting your employer's code, it's likely includes a lot of irrelevant details that readers will need to ignore when trying to reproduce the problem. Here are some guidelines. Include just enough code to allow others to reproduce the problem. For help with this, read How to Create Minimal, Complete, and Verifiable Example. If it is possible to create a live example of the problem that you can link to, for example, on Squidle and JSBin, then do so, but also copy the code into the question itself. Not everyone can access external sites, and the links may break over time. Use stack snippets to make a live demo of inline JavaScript, HTML, CSS. Do not post images of code, data, error messages, etc. Copy or type the text into the question. Please reserve the use of images for diagrams or demonstrating rendering bugs, things that are impossible to describe accurately via text. For more information, please see the Meta FAQ entry. Why not upload images of code errors when asking a question? Include all relevant tags. To try to include a tag for the language, library, and specific API your question relates to. If you start typing in the tags field, the system will suggest tags that match what you've typed. Be sure and read the descriptions given for them to make sure they're relevant to the question you're asking. See also, what are tags and how should I use them? Proofread before posting. Now that you're ready to ask your question, take a deep breath and read through it from start to finish. Pretend you're seeing it for the first time. Does it make sense? Try reproducing the problem yourself in a fresh environment and make sure you can do so only using the information included in your question. Add any details you missed and read through it again. Now is a good time to make sure that your title still describes the problem. Post the question and respond to feedback. After you post, leave the question open in your browser for a bit and see if anyone comments. If you missed an obvious piece of information, be ready to respond by editing your question to include it. If someone posts an answer, be ready to try it out and provide feedback. Looking for help, asking for help. In spite of all your efforts, you may find your questions poorly received. Don't despair. Learning to ask a good question is a worthy pursuit, and not one you'll master overnight. Here are some additional resources that you might find helpful. Okay, knowledge check. This section contains questions for you to check your understanding of this lesson on your own. If you're having trouble answering a question, click it and review the material it links to. Name at least one thing your question should always include. Do we have to click on these? Okay. Now let's check. They should be clear and they should include code. Describe the XY problem when you're asking for help with something, but that's not really what you're trying to solve. Describe 3 attributes of a help vampire. Oh, we didn't read that one yet. Help vampires, a spotter's guide. It's so regular that you could set your watch by it. The decay of a community is just as predictable as the decay of certain stable nuclear isotopes. As soon as an open source project, language, or what have you achieves a certain notoriety, its half-life, if you will, they swarm in, seemingly draining the very life out of the community itself. They are the help vampires, and I'm here to stop them. The help vampires, a spotter's guide. Help vampires are found in every public online community, from those nearest to our hearts to those furthest from our principles. Instead of consuming of ill-gotten hemoglobin, these vampires suck the very life and energy out of people. By nature, they feed on generous individuals who tend toward helping others and leave their victims exhausted, bitter, and dispirited. They're not evil creatures, help vampires. They act only on their blind instinct to feed, driven by base urges like most living things. Often, even they themselves are not aware of their help vampire status, so leave your stakes at home. In light of these facts, I will provide information on reforming, re-education, help vampires, in addition to outfitting you with information on identifying, tracking them. If in the course of events you discover that yourself are a help vampire, you will learn how to control your vampiric ways. Identifying help vampires can be tricky because they look like any ordinary person or internet user, whichever is lesser. But by closely observing an individual's behavior, using this handy checklist, you too can identify help vampires in the field. Does he ask the same tired questions others ask at a rate of once or more per minute? Does he clearly lack the ability or inclination to ask the almighty Google? Does he refuse to take the time to ask coherent, specific questions? Does he think helping him must be the high point of your day? Does he get offensive as if you need to prove to him why he should use Ruby on Rails? Is he obviously just waiting for some poor, well-intentioned person to do all his thinking for him? Can you tell he really isn't interested in having his question answered so much as getting someone else to do his work? Note that I use he here in the general sense, even though help vampires are almost exclusively male. It appears that male help vampire, drawn as it is to shiny technology, occupies an evolutionary niche that females of the species simply do not find desirable. Oh man, this is a long one. Another key indicator for help vampires is the clearly stated but impossible question. These questions look reasonable on the surface, but in fact they are impossible to answer for a number of reasons. These questions include, for example, how do I build a forum, or how can I make a chat site? Their purpose is threefold. First, to identify a victim foolish enough to attempt an answer to answer the impossible question. Second, to distract the victim long enough to separate him from his fellows. And Lastly, to befuddle the victim's brain while their soul is being removed through the abdominal cavity by way of a standard issue bendy straw. This is autonomous behavior. Again, we shouldn't hate the help vampire or stake them. They know not what they do, only that they are driven to do it, and I believe they can be saved. How do I build help vampires? Okay, that's funny. Signs of help vampire infestation. The chief indicator of the help vampire problem is the lack of helpfulness. The community may still appear to be bustling and lively, but if on closer inspection the conversation is all towards the shallow end of the pool, with moderately difficult questions going unanswered, then a help vampire infestation is likely. Help vampires are transitory. They move into a community as soon as they sense its vibrancy and intelligence. Often they leave, give up in their eyes, when they have exhausted all of the resources, leaving the community itself drained and adrift. This behavior incurs a secondary effect which further cripples the community and persists even after the help vampire problem has passed. Often, the best and brightest, sensing the outflux of decent conversation, retreat into walled garden communities which the help vampire can rarely penetrate. In this way, the individuals are sheltered from the painful effects of help vampire attacks, but they also make themselves inaccessible to non-help vampire users as well. This effect can be the last straw that leaves the community devoid of experts and utterly without hope. If you're a help vampire, now you know. Stop. Of course, it's not just that easy, or nobody would ever be a help vampire at all. Before you ask a question in a community, try to find the answer elsewhere. This way, you help yourself by stretching your mind and research abilities, and you learn things more thoroughly too. Plus, it's good karma. Always try these avenues first. Keep troubleshooting. Often we learn it's easier to give up and ask for help rather than persisting. Then, when we get our breakthrough, if we'd only delay giving up for another 10 minutes, respect yourself, go a little further before giving up. Google, of course. Google partial error messages, add software names to your queries, and generally try at least 3 or 4 searches before you give it up as hopeless. Mailing lists, forums, and news groups. Chances are you're not the first person on the earth to have this problem. Luckily, we live in an age where we can search the past, check out these resources next. Docs. Sometimes they seem impenetrable, but give it a whack. The more you learn, the easier the documentation will be to understand and decipher. Ask your questions, but phrase it differently. Instead of asking your question directly, ask, has anyone seen this problem, or can anyone point me in the right direction? Likely as not, someone will have been there before, and they might know a blog posting or other resource which can help you out. This way, you show you are respectful of their time and understand your problem is probably not unique. When you do ask a question, try to provide as much background detail as possible. Ask yourself these questions first so that others don't have to. What version of the software are you running? What's your operating system? What exactly are you trying to do that won't work? Is the problem uniform or erratic? What's the exact error message? When did it arise? What exactly don't you get? Can you provide sample code, ideally with line errors where the error occurs? Have code samples at ready when possible, and when you're talking on the IRC channel, put your code samples as on a paste bin. If you're posting code from separate parts of a project, label them with comments. Provide a little bit of flow description to help familiarize people who don't know your code from a hole in the ground. Reforming the help vampire, e.g. not you. You'll get good results by following this action plan for solving your community's help vampire problem. Create resources for help vampires and regular folks to help themselves. Seize all behavior which enables help vampires' vampy behavior. Meet help vampires head on. As you can see, none of these steps endorse violence. There are no stakes, kickboxing moves, or sneaky little ampules of holy water, although witty repartee may be involved. Creating resources. If your community's resources are spread over all the web, not organized or indexed, and generally harder to navigate than a rat's nest, then creating a solid help resource should significantly cut down help vampire activity. At the minimum, create a well-organized, preferably community-edited page which clearly lists the following: an FAQ with real frequently asked questions, not ones which just sound likely, and with clearly phrased, actionable information for each question. An up-to-date list of errors or pitfalls one is likely to encounter in the current version of the software. List of useful resources, ideally organized by topic. Installing those are just examples. Some very simple community guidelines. Most people, and even help vampires, will behave appropriately if they only know what appropriately is. Ideally, the resource page should be just that, a single page. This makes finding information easy and doesn't require a search engine. Be nice. A condescending or cruel tone in resource page will be very counterproductive. C is enabling behavior. Secondly, you must rid the community of anything which enables help vampires to keep being help vampires. Enforce autonomy. No matter how beneficent you're feeling, never directly answer a common question. This is the lazy way out, and you only enable the help vampires instead of truly helping them. Let the URL to your help resources be your only answer, but tell the vamp you are happy to help if he explores those avenues of self-help and still cannot find an answer. Foster thinking. Even if it's not a question you see go by 50 times a day, don't answer it with a direct fix, unless the person is a known non-vamp or it's a real puzzler. Answer with questions to spur and guide thought. If the help vampire resists thinking or complains, give them the URL for the resources page and withhold further assistance. Reward self-help and helping others. Thank people who ask intelligent questions and do research first, and people who make an effort to help others. Tell them they're a credit to the community. Be especially generous with praise and emoticons for those who are actively reforming their ways. Help as a trickle-down economy. Be friendly. People and help vampires are much more likely to become useful members of the community if they're met with kindness and encouragement rather than condescension and spite. They may seem like nothing but one more in a long strain of know-nothings, but you stand out very distinctly to them. Meet help vampires head on. And lastly, address the problem directly. You're a help vampire. Call a spade and a help vampire a help vampire. Tell the vamp you'll be glad to have him as a member of your community if he reforms his vampy ways. And inform him what a vampy ways you're talking about. This page is a good way to do that. Be gentle but firm. There's no reason to yell at a help vampire because they can't help what they are until they know what they are. Being cruel to a vamp is like baiting wild animals. Just continue calmly applying the techniques found under number 2. Even if the help vampire becomes recalcitrant or angry, weed out hopeless cases. There's a small subset of help vampires who feel entitled to your entire attention and have no interest in fulfilling any of your needs. If you've been calm, exercised all the other techniques, and simply ignored the vamp, and there's still no change in its behavior, just eject him from the community. This means he won't be interrupting any other exchanges in the future. Outlook positive. I felt the need to write this because I think that people are basically good and basically self-sufficient in the right circumstances. If we can only make it easy for people to be good and show them we mean business, we can change the world, or at least our small section of it. I really like that article. All right, we're going to mark this one complete.